Welcome into Paradise, Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses that they're living in a modern-day spiritual paradise. I'm your host here, on occasion, Stacy Bauman, former elder, ministerial servant, and a kid raised as a J-dub in the 70s and 80s. As I do, a little bit of a warning. We try to have some fun here, try to heal, little educational, lots of humor, and a whole bunch of other emotions. Please note, we are not trying to offend anyone in or out of Jehovah's Witnesses. And well, wow, that didn't last long, did it? Here I am. I'm back. I know. Right on time on Monday. Hopefully you're still around and listening. As I said last week, I have no idea what my schedule looks like each week, meaning there will inevitably be changes to dropping an episode every Monday. I'm going to be more sporadic. And I really, really appreciated all the kind notes and wonderful encouragement. Seriously, that's what's kept me going on this crazy thing for 4 years. 4 years now. And I appreciate you understanding that some weeks I'm just not feeling inspired by the Holy Spirit. Actually, I'm an apostate, so that means I don't even have any of that stuff. And just note that it's just going to be a little more sporadic. I'm giving myself the permission to live and not putting the pressure to turn one of these things out every Monday. So here I am. And as always, I only have the governing body to thank for this, for being here. The truth is my schedule is becoming busier. And as I shared, I'm just not feeling that inspiration, but here they were. They never let me down. In the words of one of the greatest characters ever written, Michael Corleone, in The Godfather 3, just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. So as I shared, I'm just going to be a little looser with this whole thing. I deeply appreciate all of you. And one of the things that I didn't mention last week, and probably one of the reasons I'm feeling a little burned out, was episode number 200 of Surviving Paradise. I couldn't believe it either. Many thanks, as always, to all of you for the encouragement, feedback, loyal listening for the past 4 years, on and on. I'm repeating myself. And without further ado, welcome to episode number 201. Something I didn't plan on happening within days of saying I'm going to take breaks here and there, and that tracks. I'll be here, I won't be, and that's okay. Okay, why in the world am I here this week? Well, as is the case, the group of future king priests in upstate New York dropped a very interesting feature article on the only website powered by Holy Spirit, and it caught my attention. If you're not in the know, I saw it on Tuesday of this week, an article that made me snort. And not cocaine, I was laughing. It also reminded me how much I have in common with the future kings. We have both seemingly run out of material recently to talk about. So out comes the good old retreads that saw massive growth inside Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly prior to 1975, but just got hammered into our heads in the 80s. Featured on the front page was the article, "What Does the Bible Say About Pandemics? Get the answer." And so begins the latest reminder to Jehovah's Witnesses that the world we're living in is less than perfect, including the fact that we as humans get sick, and how the only solution is available through, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses. It's the oldest sales technique in the book. Identify a problem, a pinch point, offer to give people the solution, and the fact that humans get sick has long been one of this organization's favorites. I'm here putting forward that this subject of disease, sickness, viruses, bacteria, and more is living proof, see what I did there, that the governing body doesn't understand the very subject. And no, I'm not foolish. I realize that like everything else in this religion, it's all tied up with magical events that are only here in the future. Invisible heroes, kingdoms and peoples and angels and stuff. But leaning into all things disease and pandemic is a special kind of ignorance to the human condition. And it's coming to us courtesy of 11 guys that we think should know better. It exposes their lack of knowledge regarding things like, I don't know, human biology, something they should know, considering they alone have a conduit to the actual creator himself. But look, he keeps them in the dark as well until he flips a light switch on suddenly. Then we get some new light. Consequences until he flips the light switch, well, they can be damned, as we've all seen recently. But this feature article is 5 to 6 paragraphs with easy-to-read bullet points and subheadings, see sales tactics, that don't want thinking people to do much thinking. So they hit them with the type of headlines that work on all of us today and have made social media so successful. And for whatever reason, I feel like unpacking my thoughts on this. As always, again, thank you for being here. I'm so grateful. But this article, featured on the front page, starts with your obligatory early summary from the writing committee, when it says, quote, "The Bible foretold that pestilences, widespread diseases, including pandemics, would occur during the last days. Such pandemics are not divine retribution or punishment from God. In fact, by means of his kingdom, God will soon put an end to all health problems, including pandemics." End quote. Oh yes, the Bible foretold there would be diseases during the last days. And it's here. This is where the problems begin. First, most former Jehovah's Witnesses will immediately feel an odd twinge of discomfort because we have to delve into the unthinkable with this subject. Yeah, a little thing called evolution, as well as the fact that human remains have been found that are considered millions and millions of years old. They're called prehistoric. And well, that whole thing doesn't jive with the governing body's former teaching that man has only been around, around 6,000 years. I'm laughing at that one, and they've recently received a message from heaven that they had that wrong all along. You remember they're kind of leaning away from that now. But looking back at what's still available to Jehovah's Witnesses in their illustrious library, we are told from Questions from the Readers, my kind of people, January 1st, 1987 Watchtower on page 30, the following, quote, "Second, a study of the fulfillment of Bible prophecy and of our location in the stream of time strongly indicate that each of the creative days, Genesis chapter 1, is 7,000 years long. It is understood that Christ's reign of 1,000 years will bring to a close God's 7,000-year rest day, the last day of the creative week. Based on this reasoning, the entire creative week would be 49,000 years long." End quote. Well, science, anthropology, and the like have entered the chat. It's yet another example of how the future kings that will judge you and I, they're not the best with all things time, numbers, math, human biology, and more. It's not their strong point. And so any discussion around pandemics and disease actually needs to take into account that they're starting off on the wrong foot from the beginning of this article by stating that, once more for repetition, quote, "The Bible foretold that pestilences, widespread diseases, including pandemics, would occur during the last days," end quote. It seems to ignore the fact that those things, pandemics and disease, and I know this is awkward, They've been around a lot longer than just the last days, which they claim didn't start until 1914. Yeah, I know it's a little uncomfortable for a witness, but why narrow pandemics, disease, and sickness down to just 1914 to 2026, you ask? Well, it's that whole sales technique thing again. They want humanity believing that we are now in these last days that never seem to end. And the only way to survive these days and all of the pandemics in them is, of course, to be a baptized Jehovah's Witness. Trust me, I'm getting there. But I remember growing up as a J-Dub and never questioning any of this reasoning. I could see people getting sick. I was familiar with a runny nose. I had my tonsils out at 5 years old, and who doesn't love a good bout of vomiting and diarrhea? I don't know, I experienced them, did you? I just assumed my diarrhea was so much worse than the Hershey Squirts kids were getting prior to 1914, right? Because they didn't live in the last days, so their diarrhea wasn't as bad as mine. But well, with a little age and exposure to education outside the Watchtower organization, one begins to see what this article is really about. Because man has faced pandemics, disease, and sickness well before 1914. Did you know? From the website Becoming Human, in a series of articles, we learn the following, quote, humans have dealt with disease since the dawn of our species. Pathogens are older than humanity itself, and the fossil record shows our hominid ancestors suffered from ailments like dental disease, bone infections, and arthritis millions of years ago. The struggle against disease has evolved in distinct phases alongside human history. Prehistoric and early humans, millions to thousands of years ago, were early nomadic, sparse populations battling mostly parasitic and sexually transmitted diseases. These pathogens often required animal hosts or long-term dormancy to survive in small groups. It flips to a subheading because, we're on a time frame here that's already millions of years before these last days. It shifts to the agricultural shift, which was 10,000 years ago, and says this: when humans shifted from foraging to farming, communities grew denser and lived alongside domesticated animals. This allowed zoonotic diseases, animal to human transmission, to thrive. Diseases like tuberculosis, leprosy, and malaria became widespread, evolving into the first large-scale epidemics. End quote. Epidemics before 1914? How can that be possible? Fossils that prove it. Transmission from animals, something Adam and Eve didn't address in Genesis 1 through 6. And then finally, from the National Institute of Health, we learned under the subheading Global Expansion from the 1500s onward, quote, as global exploration and trade networks expanded, previously isolated populations were exposed to new, devastating microbes, triggering global pandemics, end quote. My friends, please take note, especially if you're a Jehovah's Witness. All those dates I just shared on the history of all things pandemics were again millions and thousands of years before 1914. You remember, before Jesus told Jehovah's Witnesses to tell the world it was going to get so much worse in the last days, without ever mentioning something called common sense. And when possessed, it helps a thinking person realize that, of course, you might see a spike in disease and pandemics because, I'm thinking here. I got some brain synapses. We're firing. Oh, there it is. Because human population is growing on this planet second by second, year by year, meaning more people and more disease. Let's not just dismiss common sense. Let's, for example, just take my country of America, where the U.S. population has more than tripled since 1914, growing from about 100 million in population to roughly 345 million. For those of us that are math challenged like me, that just means a whole bunch more of little boys picking their noses, not washing their hands after going number 2, something I recently witnessed grown men doing in a public bathroom. Ugh. Nor were these people washing their bed sheets until they changed colors and got a little dark and smelly. I know it's crazy, but more people on the same rock means more germs, more bacteria, more viruses, more boogers, more skid marks, and also more disease and sicknesses. Who wants to teach the governing body some basic math principles? How about that common sense thing? The only thing special about the time period from their highly fabricated magical date of 1914 is the amount of people and animals living on the planet. I know, it's really wild when you think about it. But if you hate getting sick, they have the answers. But don't be distracted from their message, okay? As they do, they immediately point us back to their ancient book in this article. Ironically, a book they call holy, a letter from Jehovah that explains everything we need in life until you need a watchtower, but a book that was compiled by God's enemies in false religion to show the rest of us that we should have seen all of this coming. Under the subheading, Did the Bible Foretell Pandemics, in this feature article this week, we are told this, quote, "The Bible does not foretell specific pandemics or diseases, such as COVID-19, AIDS, or the Spanish flu. But it does foretell pestilences and deadly plague. These events are part of the sign of the last days, also referred to as the conclusion of the system of things." End quote. And as always, I laughed out loud. Who wants to tell the governing body and the men on the writing committee how absolutely ridiculous they sound? First, you have to love that they lean into their pandemic hall of fame by listing 3 pandemics in my lifetime that they've gotten a lot of mileage out of. COVID-19, AIDS, for those of us that were there in the 80s, and of course the Spanish flu, with its staggering death totals proving their made-up year of 1914 just must be real. For a group that relies heavily on new light, they're amazingly consistent in using and reusing world tragedies to prove that they alone have all the answers. But second, and yes, I was still laughing, COVID-19, AIDS, and the Spanish flu, who wants to tell them? Somebody tap them on the shoulder. Did not exist before the so-called last days, but lots and lots and lots of other diseases and pandemics did, meaning that pestilence and sickness has always been around, folks. It's always been part of the human condition. From Medical News Online, we're told, quote, men and early hominids have dealt with disease for millions of years. There it is again. Essentially, as long as life has existed. While infectious diseases became larger, more frequent threats when humans shifted to agrarian, densely populated societies 10,000 years ago, our ancient ancestors battled pathogens and ailments since the dawn of our lineage. End quote. Yeah. None of this says much about this week's feature article on the only website powered by Jesus and the Holy Spirit. You want to narrow down mankind's medical chart to 1914 forward? Huh? Oh, why exactly? Oh, wait. Oh, of course. I forgot. Because it encourages people to become Jehovah's Witnesses while there is still time. But aside from that, here is some interesting history for those current Jehovah's Witnesses bravely here who read this throwaway article and think it's actually telling them something intelligent. Consider a few things the writing committee missed this week. From Gavi, the Vaccine Network Online, the article of September 21st, 2002, titled 5 Ancient Diseases and What the Ancients Said About Them, subheading maybe more surprising than a 4,000-year-old prescription for extract of crocodile or a 2,600-year-old warning that sex after rich food can cause leprosy is how much the ancient medics got right. End quote. Medics? I mean, who needs medics, even in ancient times, before the all-important last days that started in 1914? The article continues. Listen in. Quote, the genetic record confirms that many of our common infectious scourges have roots in antiquity. DNA samples from the leg bones of a Roman skeleton unearthed at Lugano, Italy, for instance, proved that Falciparum malaria had ravaged the 6th century community. Using molecular clock modeling, scientists are able to peer even further into the past, poring over pathogens' evolutionary histories, revealing, for example, that the divergence of the human measles virus from the cattle bug rinderpest occurred way back in the 6th century BCE. End quote. All of this is before 1914. Consider what the Chinese knew about malaria and when they knew it from the same article. Quote, in Chinese medical documents of 270 BCE, tertian every 3rd day and quartan every 4th day fevers presenting with the characteristic enlarged spleen are clearly recognizable as malaria. The headaches, chills, and fevers were attributed to the interference of 3 demons. Interesting choice of word. Quote, one with a hammer, one with a bucket of water, and one with a stove. End quote. From the Chinese. Their take on malaria, 270 BCE. And just moving forward by a few years, consider what the Greeks, Romans, and wow, is this one awkward, even this group called the Hebrews knew about tuberculosis. It says, quote, it was Tabesto, ancient Romans, and Skypeth in ancient Hebrew. Known as Pithys in ancient Greece, tuberculosis was described by Hippocrates, writing in about 400 BCE as a wasting disease accompanied by cough, spit and fever, and which made its attacks chiefly between the ages of 18 and 35, and a finding consistent with modern observations of a tendency for active tuberculosis to hit young adults. Those who spit up frothy blood bring this up from the lung, Hippocrates understood, warning his students against taking on advanced cases. They were likely to die, he said, and could tarnish the treating physician's reputation, end quote. I know 11 guys that are concerned with their reputation as well. I mean, where were those anointed ones, like the governing body today, telling Hippocrates about the last days, pandemics and stuff? But no worries. It would all gain steam for witnesses in 1914. And those anointed guys weren't even chosen, oddly enough, until 1919 under Judge Joe Rutherford. So all those diseases and pandemics that came before that, well, folks, they don't count. Pretend like they never happened. This stuff only counts from 1914 forward, because at that time, Jehovah's Witnesses showed up. But isn't this article featured on the front page of the website really good? All this pandemic stuff, we're learning so much. But then, this article takes a turn that maybe only I deeply appreciate. And you're going to know it if you've listened to this show before. Under the subheading, "Has God ever punished people with sickness?" we are told, quote, "The Bible reports a few occasions when God used sickness to punish people. For example, he caused some individuals to have leprosy. However, these isolated incidents were not indiscriminate pandemics that spread to innocent people. Rather, such events were specific judgments on individuals who had clearly rebelled against God," end quote. Oh, no. Oh, yes, in print. Go check it out. Welcome to the next few minutes and the mind of 10-year-old Stacy, this host, where I would listen to all of those last days Watchtower studies in the 70s, and I'd go home with a headache because I couldn't figure out why Jehovah, the God of love, was allowing all of us to get sick to begin with when he could help us. And I sure couldn't figure out why it was bad at all, since I had the original Bible Stories book in my lap at every meeting. And I could see that Jehovah really liked himself a good disease. Jehovah loves himself a good pandemic. I mean, I could turn the pages in the Bible Story book, and I could see with my 10-year-old aged eyes that no one liked to make people sick more than Jehovah did. Was I alone in figuring this out? In those bright, vivid colors of the 70s, I could read and I could see illustrations of Jehovah pulling out a wide array of diseases out of that toolbox of punishments that he packs around and inflicting it on kids whenever he just got sick of them and there wasn't a bear handy to eat them. Who remembers one of my favorites? Do you remember this one? You remember that time Moses, Sister Miriam, was talking trash about Moses' wife because she wasn't one of them. She was a Cushite. Something you can incidentally see nightly on TV now, where women get together to bash other women and other guys' wives. It came from one of the Bible's favorite reality shows, The Real Housewives of Hazeroth, during the Israelites' wandering vacation. Do you remember the story? If you want to relive it, you can find it at Numbers, chapter 12, verses 12 through 16 of the New World Translation, where we learn that Jehovah doesn't like to punish women who bitch too much. He likes to pull out a flesh-eating disease and watch her skin fall off her face. It's not just any disease. Where we learn from the Bible, quote, Numbers 12, 12 through 16, "Please Do not let her continue like someone dead, whose flesh is half eaten away at birth. And Moses began to cry out to Jehovah, saying, "Oh God, please heal her. Please." Jehovah replied to Moses, "If her father would spit directly in her face, would she not be humiliated for 7 days? Let her be quarantined for 7 days outside the camp, and afterward, she may be brought back in." So Miriam was quarantined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not break camp until Miriam was brought back in. End quote. Jehovah, diseases, and how to punish a woman bashing somebody else's wife. And I gotta tell you, thank goodness Moses loved his sister. I mean, How long would this have went on? Would her face have just rotted right off? If Moses hadn't begged, we might be getting infomercials on late night TV for a Miriam-inspired skincare product. I'm guessing Miriam loved her brother in a whole new way after Jehovah spanked her with a flesh-rotting disease. But if that isn't enough, folks, don't forget that Jehovah and diseases are joined at the hip. Can you imagine if Jehovah was still striking people with leprosy for gossiping about another guy's wife? I mean, there ain't no makeup covering up this stuff, folks. Can you imagine the Jehovah's Witness sisters whose faces would be melting off from all the gossip they do about other sisters in the congregation? The elders' faces falling off for breaking confidentiality on judicial committees and gossiping about other people. Their face just melts off. The governing body would have to quarantine entire congregations who sit around gossiping. If you've been a witness, if you know, you know. So, thank goodness, Miriam took one for the team back then. No word yet on why Jehovah no longer hits trash talkers with leprosy, but Jehovah loves himself some good skin-rotting diseases back in the day, because he did the same thing later on to Elisha's servant Gehazi. Remember? He then did the same thing to King Uzziah. Remember? He just loved himself a good skin-rotting disease and pandemic. But this article on the front page this week says, and I quote, "However, those isolated incidents were not indiscriminate pandemics that spread to innocent people. Rather, such events were specific judgments on individuals who had clearly rebelled against God." End quote. Front page this week. And I have a question. Well, are you sure? Do you have time to delete this article or this paragraph? Is that so? I gotta tell you, this podcast host is just feeling even more awkward. Because I gotta tell you, despite that claim that these were isolated and they weren't indiscriminate and they were only inflicted by Jehovah on bad people, well, I've got my Bible right here. The same one that they have. And can they explain to me a couple of things? From Exodus chapter 11, verses 4 and 5 of the New World Translation, where it says, quote, "Moses then said, 'This is what Jehovah has said. About midnight, I'm going out into the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh who is sitting on his throne, to the firstborn of the slave girl who is working at the handmill, and every firstborn of the livestock.'" End quote. Wait, what? I thought the governing body just said on the front page article this week that Jehovah was always selective with his pandemics, that he never killed innocent people, and that he only used diseases on people that had rebelled against him. So, if you could explain something to me, governing body, Jehovah's Witnesses, and writing committee, what the hell did the firstborn Egyptian babies do to deserve this? Were they not innocent, as this article says? Were they doing things like teething? Did they just need a diaper change? Why was the Egyptian fathers left alone, but Jehovah sent a scourge to firstborn babies? They got the plague instead. Is this where that whole little enemies of God thing came from Stephen Lett? And hey, why the hell did Jehovah inflict a plague on the firstborn cows, the sheep, and the goats? Did they rebel against him too, as the front page article says? These are the men that are claiming to feed us the proper food spiritually in the last days. And they don't apparently understand the book they say was written for that. I love these guys. They're my favorite. What outstanding, well-researched articles they're featuring on the front page. And look, for the J-Dub apologists who want to get into the Egyptians and stuff, your guy Jehovah didn't discriminate when inflicting people with diseases and plagues. I gave you one example. You might remember that just later on, his guy King David decided to count his army, his soldiers, to see how many he had, because David was clearly a little bit insecure. Jehovah then punished him and actually gave Dave a choice on what punishment he would inflict on him. He gave him 3 choices. Jehovah's big that way. It's a multiple choice thing. And our high character King David, when not busy killing women and children or stealing other guys' wives or sleeping with virgin girls, he told Jehovah that he would accept option number 3. For counting his troops, he told Jehovah to inflict a plague, a pandemic, on 70,000 innocent Israelites who were only guilty of minding their own business while the king was out counting his troops and getting away with murder and stuff. It's in the Bible. But hey, Jehovah, disease, pandemics and stuff. And in this fun-to-read article on the front page from the governing body this week, they admitted that Jehovah himself is a big fan of pandemics and diseases. You know, only when he needs to hit someone with some punishment and stuff, except for those times that he inflicted it on completely innocent people. So far, this article, and you can see why I'm here this week, is an absolute feast for the thinking mind, isn't it? The feature article continues with this, quote, "Are today's pandemics punishment from God? No. Some people claim that God is using pandemics and other sicknesses to punish people today. However, the Bible does not support that claim. Why not? For one thing, some of God's worshipers, both past and present, have been plagued with sickness." You don't say. The faithful man Timothy, for example, suffered frequent cases of sickness. But the Bible does not say that this was a sign of God's disfavor. Likewise, today, some faithful servants of God become sick or contract diseases. Oftentimes, these individuals were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Moreover, the Bible teaches that God's time to punish the wicked has not yet arrived. Rather, we are living in a day of salvation, that is, a time when God is extending a warm invitation to all humans to draw close to Him and be saved. One way He extends that invitation is by means of a global preaching work with a positive message, the good news of the kingdom, end quote. What incredible reasoning we were just exposed to, the brilliant thoughts of the governing body. Now, why would anyone think Jehovah is using pandemics and sicknesses to punish people today? I mean, what a stretch, right? You just need to forget that he has a long history of doing it multiple times in his book, the Bible, or that this same organization says he is clearing his schedule to do it again in the near future at this event called Armageddon. But they claim it's because even good people get sick too. So it can't be a form of punishment anymore. Why? No one knows. I'm glad when I get indigestion, it's not because I committed a sin and looked at something on the internet too long. Timothy got sick, and the Bible doesn't mention it was Jehovah punishing him. So all those times Jehovah did it before Timothy, they don't count anymore, folks. Allegedly. And I can't wait to hear how Miriam will feel about this. She's going to love to hear this when she's resurrected. Wait, my face rotted off, but, Timothy, anyway. To land the point home, Jehovah's Witnesses get sick today too. And Jehovah would never make them sick. Like that time he sent a plague to 70,000 Israelites for something King David did. And again, it's not like the Israelites were his chosen covenant people or anything, right? But Jehovah's Witnesses get sick, so it can't be Jehovah making him sick anymore. You see how this works in the minds of the governing body? Just take their word for it. At some point, even good people started to get sick. What? Imagine that. And that means that Jehovah is no longer responsible or punishing people with pandemics. Sort of like that time he gave Satan complete permission. He gave him his blessing to give Job a skin disease with boils and oozing sores where he could scrape them off with the broken pottery. But that's not Jehovah's fault. He just gave Satan the thumbs up, so it's not really on him. And as the paragraph so succinctly said on the front page of the website, those people, well, they were just in, how did they put it here? Quote, they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. End quote. Go read it for yourself. And sort of like those Jehovah's Witnesses who were told that they couldn't store their blood and reinfuse it prior to a surgery in February of 2026, they might have died. But just days later, in March of 2026, a different Jehovah's Witness could store their blood and they got to live. It's all just a case of, what did the paragraph say again here? Oh yeah, they were just, again, quote, in the wrong place at the wrong time, end quote. What bad luck, huh? Sick in February, can't store your blood. Sick in March, you can. Such an odd way for the Creator to deal with life and death when you're the Almighty, but we're assured by the governing body that this just must be so. Period. Don't think too hard about this, folks, okay? But according to this article, the diseases running rampant today, they're not from Jehovah, even when they were in the past, but not today, and that it's all about timing. Wrong place, wrong time. It isn't time right now for Jehovah to punish the wicked, so it's all just bad luck when you get sick now, or we have pandemics. However, just so you know, and Jehovah's Witnesses can back this, when it is time for Jehovah to punish the wicked, guess what he's going to pull out of his toolbox of punishment? Are you ready? From the Watchtower of August 1st, 1981, page 28, we're told, quote, before him, pestilence kept going, says the prophet, and burning fever would go forth at his feet. In the near future, as Jehovah marches to the war of the great day of God the Almighty at Armageddon, he will bring death upon many of his enemies by the non-violent, silent means of execution, pestilence. It will then be dangerous, fatal, to get in the way of Jehovah's line of march to victory. For ahead of his steps, he will send the pestilence. Behind his heels, he will leave victims afflicted with death-dealing, burning fever. End quote. So, Jehovah's just taking a break, folks, from using that whole disease, pestilence, punishment thing. But in case you're in doubt, how about just one more? From the publication Paradise Restored to Mankind by Theocracy, pages 389 and 390, the governing body tells us, quote, "And this is what will prove to be the scourge, which with Jehovah will scourge all the peoples that will actually do military service against Jerusalem. There will be, by the way, trigger warning, if you have a weak stomach, this is again from the faithful slave, so it's all okay, quote, there will be a rotting away of one's flesh while one is standing upon one's feet, and one's very eyes will rot away in their sockets, and one's very tongue will rot away in one's mouth. And it must occur in that day that confusion from Jehovah will become widespread among them, and they will actually grab hold each one of the hand of his companion, and his hand will actually come up against the hand of his companion. And Judah itself also will be warring at Jerusalem. And the wealth of all the nations round about will certainly be gathered, gold and silver and garments in excessive abundance. And this is how the scourge of the horse, the mule, the camel, and the male ass, and every sort of domestic animal that happens to be in those camps will prove to be like this scourge." End quote. Well, Jehovah and pandemics and stuff. He's at it again at a day close and near in the future. Eyeballs rotting out of our sockets, tongues falling out of our mouths, even the poor horses, mules, camels, and donkeys, and every other domestic animal. That's right, including your cats and dogs. Go hug Fido while you can. Give little Susie, the Persian cat, a neck rub. They'll just rot away from Jehovah's scourges. I mean, wow. The governing body wants everyone to read this neat little article on the website about pandemics, disease, and stuff. But, well, probably just a slip. Missed the writing committee's mind. They don't do a lot of thinking while writing this article. You see, I'm keeping track of the score now. I'm writing it down here, and I'm really confused. Past pandemics and diseases, Jehovah made it happen. Pandemics and diseases today, that's not Jehovah. Future pandemics and diseases, Jehovah is going to use them again to kill everybody. That's the scorecard, according to the faithful slave. For those of us that grew up running to turn off the channel on the TV whenever a trailer for a horror movie came on, if you were there, you know. I remember The Shining, like yesterday, running to the TV in slow motion. The demons are going to get in the house. Those trailers had nothing on the Bible itself when it comes to what Jehovah wants to do with scourges, plagues, pandemics, and stuff. If you've seen Event Horizon, or that final scene in Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark, those were like watching Nickelodeon cartoons compared to what the Bible describes Jehovah doing with this week's feature article, pandemics. But with all of this pandemic, germ, and disease stuff, I got thinking. Most of us have heard the reports that a ton of disease come from contact with animals. I've read it to you. In fact, the faithful and discreet slave would, oh, wow, this is something. They're always looking out for us. We are their responsibility, remember. Jesus has entrusted our lives, our salvation to them. The faithful slave even wants Jehovah's Witnesses to know that their family dog represents a serious danger. They're nothing more than disease-carrying traps for Jehovah's Witnesses. Maybe they're even demonized. I don't know. From the life-changing article from November 8th in the 1971 Awake, titled, "A Friendly Dog, Is It Safe?" The governing body delivers again. Quote, As the number of dogs increases, so do their wastes. A large dog will eliminate 1.25 pounds of feces a day, but the average for all dogs is about 0.75 pounds. That amounts to over 60,000 tons of solid waste a year from just New York City dogs. Odd. I wonder, Brooklyn, Bethel, never mind. Quote, and that does not include millions of gallons of urine. End quote for a moment. What Bethelite walked out of Brooklyn, Bethel in the 70s and got pissed off because they walked in some dog shit? I can't believe this. Back to the article, quote, can these wastes cause disease? Yes, they can. For example, they can spread leptospirosis, which in humans is usually called Wheels disease or rat fever. It is estimated that 50% of all dogs in the world have been stricken with leptospirosis at one time or another. Humans can become infected by contact with dog excretions, especially urine. In some places, dogs also become infected with tapeworms belonging to the genus Echinococcus. The eggs of these worms are expelled in dog feces. Persons who pet contaminated dogs or are licked by them, can get these microscopic eggs on their hands, and if they are ingested, they can cause hydatid disease or hydatidosis. Cattle and swine are ravaged by this disease in Uruguay, and some 500 human cases of hydatidosis are diagnosed there a year, and about 50 persons die. End quote. Oh, no. Oh, who knew? Thank you, governing body, from this Awake article. Satan is even using our family dogs against us. And hey, as I do, I find myself drifting away to the one man who over 1 year's time of his life probably became the world's only expert on all things animal shit. That's right, my guy Noah. Can you imagine what he battled sitting among piles and piles and puddles of dog shit, elephant crap, camel poo, hyena doo-doo, mounds and mounds and mounds of it, all soaked in the many delightful different animal urines that were sloshing around at his feet and may have even gotten up to the knee level after a year in that boat and at sea. But miraculously, my guy Noah never got sick. Neither did Mrs. Noah, nor did his sons and their wives. Animals, food, piles of animal dung everywhere, swimming in a pool of urine, maybe even soaking the food supplies for my guy in his floating zoo, and no one got sick. Ah, yes, the faithful and discreet slave, and an article that gets thinking people thinking. Pandemics and stuff, they're always devastating until they're not, because you need a cool story to explain an ancient book that kicks off with a couple of nudes and a talking snake. And as always, it comes back to my favorite, my guy Noah. Even bacteria and disease couldn't dent or impact the one guy I admire above all others. But family dogs are very dangerous, people. But this neat article on the front page of this week's website concludes with a simple paragraph that says this: will pandemics ever end? Yes. The Bible foretells a time in the near future when no one will be sick. Under the rule of his kingdom, God will cure all health problems. He will do away with suffering, pain, and death. And he will bring back to life those who have died so that they can enjoy good health here on earth under perfect conditions. End quote. Ah, yes. There's always a message. It's usually 1 to 2 sentences at the end of every Watchtower and Awake article. We know it well. It has inspired zillions of Watchtower illustrations, everyone running around in paradise in perfect health, without anyone who's looking at the illustration of paradise, them in their khakis eating fruit bowls for all of eternity. They never put any thought into the fact that, well, those illustrations that they're showing us, folks, I'm going to break something here. Breaking news. I can't call it new light. I'm an apostate. But paradise, well, folks, perfect health, diseases, pandemics, viruses, bacteria, paradise without those things, folks, it's impossible. It's impossible. You see, just a note from the real scientists, just imperfect men who've studied this, not the 11 guys in New York who specialize in real estate purchases and video production, but actual scientists who have long studied disease, sickness, viruses, and bacteria, and a whole bunch of other things, and would like you to know some facts. Would you like to know what they've discovered? Even during these so-called last days, would you like to know what is necessary to sustain human life? I know this is going to be a real uncomfortable moment, but from the BBC, the June 2020 article, Why the World Needs... what? Titled, Why the World Needs Viruses to Function. Uh-oh! The subheading, if all viruses disappeared, the world would be very different and not necessarily for the better. But what exactly would happen? Quote, viruses seem to exist solely to wreak havoc on society and bring suffering to humanity. They have cost untold lives over the millennia, often knocking out significant chunks of the global population. From the 1918 influenza epidemic, which killed 50 to 100 million people, to the estimated 200 million who died from smallpox in the 20th century alone. The current COVID-19 pandemic is just one in a series of ongoing and never-ending deadly viral assaults. If given the choice to magically wave a wand and cause all viruses to disappear, most people would probably jump at that opportunity, especially now. End quote. I know 11 guys in New York who pitch it. They've got lots and lots of pretty illustrations of people living without viruses on their paradise Earth. Back to the BBC article. Pay special attention. Quote, yet this would be a deadly mistake. Deadlier, in fact, than any virus could ever be. If all viruses suddenly disappeared, the world would be a wonderful place for about a day and a half, and then we'd all die. That's the bottom line, says Tony Goldberg, an epidemiologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. All the essential things they do in the world far outweigh the bad things. The vast majority of viruses are not pathogenic to humans, and many play integral roles in propping up ecosystems. Others maintain the health of individual organisms, everything from fungi and plants to insects and humans. We live in a balance, in a perfect equilibrium, and viruses are part of that, says Susana Lopez Shiraton, a virologist at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. I think we'd be done without viruses. End quote. What a fantastic article this week. Governing body. Do you care to comment? Does the cat got your tongue? Or did it fall out when Jehovah hit you with a scourge? Okay, I'm done. The faithful and discreet slave. Turning out the kind of spiritual food that defies common sense, that makes thinking people need to take an aspirin and makes you just lay in bed at night losing sleep. Common sense be damned. Facts be damned. Timelines, the history of man, how we've evolved, or anything else, it can all be damned when you're pitching a paradise Earth free of pandemics. What did the doctor here say? Doesn't look like we'd be living forever in a paradise. He said we'd live about a day and a half. I don't even know if my guy Noah's going to have time to show up. Welcome to the spiritual food in 2026, churned out by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm done. Thank you for bearing with me this week. I rather enjoy feeling like I had something to say. So here I was, even if it was unexpected, I thought I'd take a little break. I'm going to toy with similar formats moving forward. I'm going to take breaks from time to time and even post shorter episodes. Things, I just want to be more inspired, folks. I'm also considering the idea of mixing in interviews. I just have no interest personally in being internet known, famous, or YouTube famous. It's just not for me. So it would likely be audio only. I'm going to play with this idea. I'm going to give myself to think about it. With all of that said, I hope everyone is feeling healthy. They posted this article under the question, front page, what does the Bible say about pandemics? I'll answer that with one more dig on my way out the door. You see, the Bible has a lot to say about disease and pandemics. In fact, it gives it to us in gross detail. How remarkable that the same Bible has absolutely nothing, complete silence to say about using human blood to save human life. And if you're not thinking about that, you should be. Thanks for being here this week, wherever you may be. Thanks for hanging out for episode 201. And be well.